You work hard, but somehow it never feels like enough. The bills keep coming, the pressure never stops, and even when you earn more, peace still feels out of reach. You tell yourself this is what success looks like: the home, the job, the comfort, but deep down, something feels off. Maybe comfort has quietly turned into a cage. If that sounds familiar, this audiobook might just be what you've been looking for. Because the real dream isn't about having more, it's about feeling free. Hey book lovers, welcome to Book Seal. In this summary of Set for Life, we'll explore the hidden trap of the American dream and how to design a life that gives you time, choice, and calm instead of constant chase. So let's begin. Chapter 1. Seeing the real meaning of freedom. Most people think freedom arrives with a number, a salary, a balance, a portfolio that finally makes you feel safe. But if you've ever met someone with money who still looks tired, anxious, and strangely trapped, you already know that isn't freedom. Real freedom begins long before you reach financial milestones. It starts the moment you decide to live on your own terms. For most of us, that moment doesn't happen suddenly. It creeps in, usually after one too many mornings spent rushing out the door, coffee in hand, chasing a paycheck that never seems to stay. It's that quiet voice that asks, "Is this really it?" And when you pause long enough to hear it, you realize it's not the work that's breaking you. It's the lack of choice, the constant trade between your hours and someone else's priorities. Freedom, in its truest form, isn't the ability to buy anything. It's the ability to wake up and decide how you'll spend your time. It's having the space to think, to rest, to create without asking permission. Money helps, yes, but money is only useful when it gives you that space. The peace of mind that lets you breathe without checking your phone every 5 minutes or refreshing your bank app after every small purchase. Scott Trench's philosophy begins right here with clarity. Before you chase more, you have to understand what enough actually means to you. Because if you don't, every raise, every upgrade, every success will only expand the cage. You'll buy the bigger home, the nicer car, the fancier dinner, but you'll quietly feel the same, maybe even emptier, because now the stakes are higher. The treadmill just got faster. The truth is, most of what we call security is fear in disguise. We fill our days with tasks, our closets with things, our calendars with obligations, all to avoid sitting with the discomfort of asking, "What do I really want?" And yet, that question is the key to everything. Without clarity, freedom becomes just another consumer product sold in ads, marketed through lifestyles, and rarely lived. So, what does freedom really look like? It's different for everyone. For some, it's the ability to travel without counting vacation days. For others, it's spending a Tuesday morning at home with their kids, or walking to the park with no rush to get back. It's the power to say no to what drains you, and yes to what brings you alive. It's not glamorous, but it's deeply peaceful. The irony is that the path to this kind of freedom often begins with discipline. The kind of quiet, invisible work no one celebrates. Saying no to impulse, cutting back on excess, saving when it's easier to spend. But discipline isn't punishment, it's the doorway. Every intentional choice you make creates a little more space between you and the noise. You start to notice things you used to miss. The way you spend money mirrors how you spend time. The things you chase say more about what you fear than what you value. And somewhere in that reflection, you find something priceless. Control. Not over the world, but over yourself, over your reactions, your attention, your direction. When Scott Trench talks about becoming set for life, he isn't talking about being rich. He's talking about having the power to design your life around meaning, not money. To earn in ways that align with who you are, and to spend in ways that bring peace, not pressure. The first step isn't financial, it's psychological. It's understanding that you're not in competition with anyone, that your timeline doesn't have to match the world's pace. Real freedom is quieter than you think. It doesn't shout, it doesn't post, it doesn't need validation. It feels like stillness when you realize you finally own your time, when your choices aren't about survival, but alignment. When you stop trying to prove and start trying to live, that's the moment you stop chasing the illusion of freedom and start experiencing it. The day you realize it was never about escaping work, it was about escaping the feeling that you have no choice in it. And maybe that's the first truth worth remembering. Freedom doesn't begin when you have everything. It begins when you stop needing everything to feel free. Chapter 2. Awakening from the American Dream. Somewhere along the way, we were told that success had a formula. Go to school, get a job, buy a car, buy a house, work for 40 years, retire, hopefully healthy enough to enjoy what's left. It's the promise that built entire generations. But if you listen closely, you can hear the quiet exhaustion behind it. Because for many people, that dream has started to feel more like a trap than a path. It's strange, isn't it? How something meant to give us security often leaves us restless. We're told to be grateful for stability, yet most of us feel like we're running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. The house that once felt like a milestone now feels like a mortgage. The job title that once felt like pride now feels like pressure. And somewhere beneath it all, we whisper to ourselves, there has to be more than this. That whisper, that uneasy feeling, isn't failure. It's awakening. It's the moment you realize that the system wasn't built to make you free. It was built to keep you comfortable enough not to question it. To keep you working just hard enough, spending just enough, and dreaming just far enough to stay in motion without ever stepping off the wheel. Scott Trench challenges that rhythm. He calls out the illusion for what it is: a cycle of work and consumption dressed up as progress. Because when your income rises, so does your lifestyle. When your lifestyle rises, so does your dependence. And suddenly, you're earning more than ever before, yet still living paycheck to paycheck. Only now the numbers are bigger and the anxiety is louder. It's a quiet kind of slavery, the one that comes with convenience and comfort. The one that trades your freedom for an upgraded car and a new kitchen. You work for the things you think will make you happy, and then you work even harder to keep them. The walls of the dream become invisible, but they're still there. They just smell like fresh paint and new leather. The shift begins when you stop asking, how much can I afford? And start asking, what do I actually need? Because most people don't go broke from lack of income. They go broke from chasing a life that isn't truly theirs. They buy because others buy. They spend to keep up. They upgrade because staying still feels like failure. But real growth isn't about upgrading things. It's about upgrading awareness. When you start living intentionally, everything changes. You stop making automatic decisions. You stop assuming that more is better. You start noticing how much energy is lost maintaining the illusion of success. The long commutes, the endless bills, the weekends spent recovering instead of living. You start to see that the real luxury isn't in what you own, it's in what you no longer need to chase. That's where the idea of financial independence becomes something deeper than money. It becomes a philosophy of choice, a quiet rebellion against the narrative that your worth depends on your productivity. It's about rewriting the dream one, where you don't have to wait until you're 65 to feel alive. You can start designing a lighter, freer life now, but that takes courage. Because walking away from the traditional script can look like failure to the people still following it. You might downsize, simplify, or step back from a career that looks impressive on paper, and that can make others uncomfortable. But comfort isn't the same as happiness. Approval isn't the same as freedom. And if your success doesn't feel like peace, then maybe it's time to redefine what success even means. It's not about rejecting ambition, it's about aligning it. Working, not to buy status, but to buy back time. Earning, not to impress others, but to create space for what matters. Building wealth, not to escape life, but to experience it more fully. The American dream told us to wait to trade youth for retirement, curiosity for certainty, and freedom for routine. But awakening means realizing you don't have to wait anymore. You can live intentionally now. You can choose less noise, fewer obligations, and a life built around meaning instead of marketing. That's the quiet revolution. Scott invites you into the freedom to wake up one day and say, I no longer need to prove anything. Maybe that's the real dream after all. Not to climb higher, but to live lighter. Not to collect more, but to finally feel free enough to say, this is enough. Chapter 3. Building Strength Through Frugality. At first glance, frugality sounds like deprivation, a word that tastes like limitation. But when you look closer, it's actually the opposite. It's the quiet art of reclaiming control. Every dollar you don't spend isn't just money saved. It's power preserved. It's another small piece of your life you choose not to hand away. Most people misunderstand this. They think being frugal means living small, driving an old car, skipping the latte, turning down fun. But what Scott Trench reminds us is that frugality isn't about saying no to life, it's about saying yes to freedom. The goal isn't to restrict yourself. It's to build the financial flexibility to say yes to the right things when they come along. The first $25,000 you save might not sound like much in a world obsessed with millions, but it's everything. It's your first financial runway, a cushion that gives you permission to make smarter, bolder choices. You can take a better job that pays less now but opens doors later. You can start a small business without panicking about next month's rent. That cushion isn't just money, it's breathing room. It's opportunity in disguise. The mindset behind it is even more powerful than the number itself. When you live below your means, something shifts. You start to notice how many of your decisions were driven by impulse, comparison, or exhaustion. You start to see how often spending was used to cover discomfort, how easily convenience became dependency. Frugality strips that away. It teaches you that peace of mind doesn't come from buying, but from knowing you could buy and choosing not to. There's a strange kind of confidence that comes from that, a deeper sense of self-respect. Because every time you resist the urge to upgrade, you remind yourself that you are not controlled by trends or pressure. You're building a kind of strength that doesn't need validation. The world teaches you to spend for status. Frugality teaches you to save for power. And power, in this sense, is freedom from needing approval. Scott calls this the foundation of wealth, and he's right, because no investment strategy or high income can save someone who spends everything they earn. The person who saves consistently, even modestly, will always outpace the one who chases, raises, but lives paycheck to paycheck. Our system may reward earners on paper, but it quietly favors savers in real life. The tax code itself tilts toward those who invest, not those who consume. And here's the deeper truth. Frugality isn't just financial. It's psychological. It's a mindset of self-reliance, learning to fix things yourself instead of outsourcing every inconvenience, choosing function over flash, choosing good enough over the best. These choices, small as they seem, reshape how you see value. You stop asking, "What can I buy?" and start asking, "What can I build?" This isn't about deprivation. It's about design. Each simple, mindful choice compounds. Every unnecessary subscription canceled, every dinner cooked at home, every habit examined, all of it builds resilience. You begin to chip away at the invisible walls of dependency, one deliberate decision at a time. There's a quiet rhythm to it. The steady habit of living on less becomes strangely addictive, not because you enjoy cutting costs, but because you begin to feel light, free, capable. You realize that every reduction in spending is an increase in strength. Every time you fix something instead of replacing it, you strengthen the muscle that says, "I can handle my own life." Over time, that strength becomes wealth, not the kind printed on statements, but the kind that sits quietly inside you, the confidence of knowing that your survival doesn't depend on anyone's paycheck but your own discipline, the kind of wealth that can't be shaken by a bad quarter or a job loss. Frugality, when done right, doesn't make life smaller, it expands it. It gives you options to travel slower, to think longer, to work on things that matter instead of things that merely pay. And that's the point Scott was always making. Wealth is not a pile of money, it's a pile of choices. So the next time someone calls you cheap, smile a little. Because what they see as limitation is really liberation. You're not missing out on life, you're just no longer renting it. You're quietly buying your way back to freedom, one disciplined choice at a time. Chapter 4. Designing an efficient life. There's a difference between living simply and living efficiently. Simplicity removes the clutter. Efficiency designs the system. And when your system works for you, not against you, every part of life starts to breathe easier. Scott Trench often points out that most people try to optimize the small stuff, the skipped coffee, the coupon, the sale while ignoring the big things that quietly drain their lives: housing, transportation, food, time. These are the heavy hitters. They account for most of your financial and emotional weight. When you fix them, everything else begins to fall into place. An efficient life starts with awareness, understanding where your energy actually goes. The average person spends most of their waking hours working to pay for things that make their life harder. A long commute, an expensive apartment, too many bills stacked across the month. Efficiency begins by reversing that, living close to work, cutting fixed costs, choosing less convenience now for far greater freedom later. It sounds practical, almost boring, but the emotional payoff is huge. Imagine waking up in a home that doesn't suffocate your finances. Imagine walking to work instead of crawling through traffic. Imagine finishing each month with more money, more time, and more energy. Efficiency isn't just about money saved, it's about life regained. Scott's framework isn't about deprivation, it's about architecture. He breaks down the design of life into intentional systems that serve your bigger goals: a system for money, a system for health, a system for decisions. Because willpower alone is unreliable, structure is what creates lasting freedom. When your routines support your purpose, you stop relying on motivation. You just flow. Housing is the first cornerstone. For most Americans, it's the single largest expense and the most emotional one. We're taught that success means square footage, that comfort means ownership. But efficiency asks a different question. Does my home give me flexibility, or does it trap me? Renting an affordable place near work, sharing space with roommates, or even choosing a smaller home isn't regression, it's strategy. It's trading square feet for peace of mind. Transportation is next. It's not just a cost, it's a time thief. Long commutes quietly steal your energy, your patience, and your potential. Choosing to walk, bike, or live closer to where you earn doesn't just cut fuel expenses. It gives you back hours of your life. Those hours compound faster than interest. Then there's food. One of the most underestimated habits of wealth. Cooking at home isn't only cheaper, it's a declaration of control. When you cook, you decide what goes into your body and what leaves your wallet. You trade short-term convenience for long-term vitality. And in a world addicted to delivery, that small act becomes quietly rebellious. Insurance, healthcare, entertainment, they all follow the same principle: awareness and intention. Choose higher deductibles if you're stable, move your body, maintain your health, and you'll pay less for healthcare in the long run. Cancel the subscriptions that don't serve you. Keep the ones that add genuine joy. Invest in self-education instead of mindless distraction. Every dollar spent on growth multiplies. Every dollar spent on escape fades. Efficiency isn't about perfection, it's about alignment. It's designing a lifestyle where every expense has a purpose, every routine has a reason, and every habit leads somewhere you actually want to go. When you align your environment with your goals, discipline stops feeling like a burden. It becomes natural. What's remarkable about this way of living is how quickly it compounds. A few $100s saved on rent becomes thousands a year. A shorter commute creates space for side projects or rest. Cooking, instead of eating out, adds up not just financially, but emotionally. Meals become slower, more mindful, more human, and over time, you start to notice something subtle. Life feels lighter. The noise fades. You stop thinking in terms of sacrifice and start thinking in terms of choice. The same system that once trapped you now supports you. Your budget stops feeling like a cage and starts feeling like a map. An efficient life doesn't look glamorous on the outside. It looks calm, unhurried, grounded. But underneath that calm is immense power, because every dollar, every hour, every decision now flows in the direction of your freedom. That's what Scott means when he talks about strategic living. It's not about frugality for its own sake. It's about designing a life so intentional, so efficient, that your time stops being consumed by maintenance and starts being used for creation. Because when you finally stop spending energy just to keep up, you discover how much of it you can redirect toward building something truly yours. And that's when your life stops being busy and starts becoming free. Chapter 5. Turning home and work into assets. For most people, home and work are the two biggest parts of life and the two biggest sources of financial stress. One drains your paycheck, the other consumes your time. But what if both could become your allies instead of your obligations? What if where you live and how you work could actually fund your freedom? That's the shift Scott Trench makes clear, that your largest expenses can also be your greatest opportunities. The idea is simple, but rarely practiced. Stop treating your home as a trophy and start treating it as a tool. Stop seeing your job as a sentence and start seeing it as a stage, a place to build skills, leverage, and choices. Let's start with housing, the single biggest line in most people's budgets. For decades, we've been taught that buying a home is the ultimate mark of success. The problem is, many buy the wrong way, stretching for luxury, not leverage. The beautiful condo, the dream house, the neighborhood that sounds impressive, all of it can quietly trap you in years of financial tension. A mortgage that eats your freedom one monthly payment at a time. But there's another way. Scott introduces the concept of house hacking, using your home not just as a place to live, but as an income-producing asset. It could mean renting out a spare room, buying a duplex and living in one half, or transforming unused space into opportunity. Instead of paying full price for your housing, you let someone else help you cover it sometimes, even completely. This isn't just math, it's mindset. It means shifting from, "How can I afford this?" to, "How can I make this work for me?" It's realizing that your home can either consume your wealth or create it. The person who lives for free, or nearly free, while building equity, gains something far more valuable than savings. They gain flexibility. The freedom to choose work that matters, to take risks others can't afford, to live without the quiet panic of bills dictating every decision. Of course, house hacking isn't glamorous. It comes with work maintenance, tenants, repairs, trade-offs. But so does every version of ownership. The difference here is that the work pays you back. Each month, each year, the property moves you closer to independence. What once felt like a fixed expense slowly turns into a growing asset. Over time, the math compounds. What started as a necessity becomes a wealth engine. Then there's work, the other half of the equation. Most people see their job as something to escape, but Scott urges us to look deeper. The goal isn't to run from work. It's to reshape how it serves your long-term freedom. Your job can be a laboratory, a place to learn skills, build networks, and find leverage points. If you approach your career strategically, every project, every conversation, every raise becomes capital for your next move. That's why he emphasizes the importance of scalability. A scalable career is one where your effort doesn't just trade hours for dollars, it multiplies results. It's about positioning yourself in roles that reward performance, not just time. Surrounding yourself with high achievers, learning continuously, making fast decisions on small matters to save energy for big ones, and putting yourself in places where luck can find you, because opportunity rarely knocks on closed doors. When you combine these two ideas, a home that generates wealth and a career that multiplies it, something powerful happens. You stop living reactively. You begin to play offense. Every choice becomes a building block instead of a burden. Your expenses shrink, your income grows, and suddenly, the idea of financial freedom doesn't feel abstract anymore. It feels real. This is how ordinary people build extraordinary lives. Not through lottery luck or inheritance, but through design. By turning the two biggest anchors in modern life, home and work, into sales. It's not an overnight shift, but it's a permanent one, because once your living space supports your wealth instead of draining it, once your work becomes a ladder instead of a leash, you stop surviving your life and start building it. That's the quiet revolution Scott speaks of. Using what you already have to create what you actually want. Not waiting for the perfect moment, but designing freedom right where you stand. Chapter 6. Multiplying wealth with purposeful investing. The moment you build stability, when the bills are under control and your savings begin to grow, a new question appears. What now? That's where most people hesitate, because saving feels safe, but investing feels uncertain. Yet Scott Trench reminds us, without investment, freedom remains incomplete. You can't save your way to independence. You must build systems that allow your money to work for you, even when you're not working. Investing isn't about chasing the next big thing. It's about understanding how wealth truly compounds through patience, discipline, and strategy. It starts with one simple rule: never spend the principal, protect your base. Because your principal is your engine, and every dollar it produces is fuel. You can spend the fuel, but never the engine. That's how wealth sustains itself, quietly, steadily, through the power of reinvested return. Most people see investing as risky because they confuse motion with mastery. They jump from one hot tip to another, chasing speed instead of consistency. But purposeful investing is boring, deliberately boring. It's less about excitement and more about endurance. You pick assets you understand, systems you trust, and you let time do the heavy lifting. Scott breaks this down into a few timeless principles. First, capital comes from effort. You can't invest what you haven't earned or saved. The best investment strategy in the world won't save someone who's still living beyond their means. Step 1 is earning enough to save. Step 2 is saving enough to invest. Step 3, the part most people rush into, is investing with purpose. The second principle is control. The more control you have over an investment, the greater your potential return and the greater your responsibility. Active investments like real estate or small businesses can yield higher rewards because they depend on your skill, knowledge, and effort. Passive investments like index funds or bonds offer steadier but slower growth. Neither is right or wrong, both are tools. The key is to balance them based on your stage of life, your temperament, and your goals. Then there's the idea of knowledge. The return you earn is often proportional to the depth of your understanding. You don't have to be an expert in every market, but you do need clarity in the few areas you commit to. Whether it's property, stocks, or entrepreneurship, the more you learn, the less you gamble. Knowledge doesn't eliminate risk, it refines it. And yet, perhaps the most misunderstood part of investing is the emotional one. Because real investing isn't just math, it's mindset. The hardest part isn't choosing the right asset. It's staying calm when the world panics, when the market dips, when headlines scream, when everyone around you forgets that volatility isn't risk, it's the price of admission for long-term gain. Scott often emphasizes that the goal of investing isn't to get rich quickly, it's to get free, steadily. To build real assets that replace your dependency on a paycheck. To create a loop where your money earns more money, and your time earns back your life. You invest not to impress, but to liberate. You build not to flaunt, but to sustain. Index funds, for example, represent one of the simplest yet most effective vehicles. They're not designed to make you a millionaire overnight. They're designed to grow with the world. By owning small pieces of many strong companies, you ride the overall economy instead of betting on single outcomes. You avoid the ego of stock picking and embrace the quiet confidence of time. But if you crave more control, real estate becomes the natural complement. Properties that cash flow, even modestly, can multiply wealth faster than almost any other asset, precisely because they combine leverage, appreciation, and income. A single property, held for years, can change your trajectory not because it's glamorous, but because it's practical. It forces discipline, patience, and a long-term view. When you blend both passive growth through markets and active growth through ownership, you create balance. One gives you security, the other gives you acceleration. Together, they form the rhythm of wealth. Earn, save, invest, repeat. The real mastery lies in doing it with intention. Investing not from greed, but from clarity. Because when you invest with purpose, every decision reflects something deeper, not a desire for more, but a desire for freedom. In the end, that's what wealth really is. Not the size of your bank account, but the space between your choices and your obligations. The room to pause, to think, to live. Purposeful investing builds that space one steady decision at a time. Chapter 7. Tracking progress and refining habits. Freedom doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in through awareness the moment you stop living on autopilot and start measuring what actually matters. Most people think they have a money problem, but what they really have is a clarity problem. They don't know where their time, energy, and dollars truly go. Scott Trench teaches that tracking isn't about restriction, it's about truth. Because you can't change what you won't measure, and you can't improve what you never face. It starts with one simple habit: knowing your numbers. Not obsessively, not fearfully, just honestly. Your income, your spending, your net worth, your time. These are the four mirrors of your life. Together, they show you where your efforts are working and where you're quietly bleeding potential. When you start tracking, you begin to see patterns that were invisible before. That unused subscription, that weekly spending habit that quietly adds up, that raise that vanished into lifestyle creep. Numbers tell the story that emotions try to hide. Scott often highlights a key metric: usable net worth, not the inflated total that includes your car or fancy gadgets, but the real, liquid value that supports your freedom. Assets that generate income, minus the liabilities that drain it. It's a clear reflection of how close you are to independence. Because you can't live off prestige, and you can't retire on possessions. Only usable wealth, cash flow, equity, and investments that grow buys you time. Tracking isn't glamorous, but it's liberating. It pulls your attention back to what you can control. And once you see your reality clearly, course correction becomes easy. Maybe you find that your housing costs swallow half your income. Maybe your daily routines are packed with small leaks, unplanned meals, impulse purchases, forgettable indulgences. Awareness doesn't guilt you. It guides you. You stop asking, "Why can't I save?" and start asking, "Where can I adjust?" Then comes the deeper layer: habits. The real architecture of financial freedom isn't built from spreadsheets. It's built from consistency. Most people fail not because their goals are too ambitious, but because their daily behaviors never align with them. They say they want freedom, yet fill their evenings with distraction. They say they want progress, yet delay the small, unglamorous actions that create it. Scott breaks it down with brutal simplicity. You can have comfort, or you can have change, but rarely both at once. And the people who reach financial independence are rarely those with the highest income. They're the ones with the highest intention. They use their time consciously. They track their habits like they track their money. They know that freedom isn't just earned, it's practiced. He lists 10 habits that quietly sabotage progress: endless streaming, obsessive sports watching, a luxury home far from work, constant eating out, scrolling through social media instead of building skills, hitting snooze, shopping without purpose, trying to do everything. They all seem harmless, even normal. But together, they devour hours, energy, and focus. They make you feel busy without being effective. They replace deliberate living with passive consumption. The fix isn't extreme discipline. It's awareness with compassion. You don't eliminate every pleasure. You choose which ones matter. You keep what nourishes your spirit and cut what numbs it. You realize that saying no to distractions isn't punishment, it's protection. You're protecting your focus, your energy, your potential. And once you protect those, progress becomes inevitable. Tracking also creates momentum. Each small win compounds one less expense, one smarter decision, one extra hour redirected towards something meaningful. These are the quiet victories that build confidence. And over time, confidence becomes identity. You stop identifying as someone trying to get ahead and start feeling like someone who already owns their path. When you live this way, every day becomes data, not in a robotic sense, but in a reflective one. You start noticing what energizes you and what drains you. You begin adjusting faster, fine-tuning choices before they turn into mistakes. That's what Scott calls refining the act of living with intentional feedback. Instead of waiting for a crisis, you evolve continuously. Eventually, tracking stops feeling like effort. It becomes second nature, a background awareness that keeps your life in alignment. And in that rhythm, something beautiful happens. Peace replaces chaos. You no longer feel lost or behind. You know where you are, where you're going, and what it takes to get there. Because the truth is, financial freedom isn't built in leaps. It's built in loops, small, consistent cycles of awareness, action, and adjustment. The people who win aren't the ones who never stumble. They're the ones who notice quickly and course correct with grace. That's the quiet strength Scott teaches. Not perfection, but precision. Not chasing control, but creating clarity. And once you master that, you stop wondering when freedom will arrive, because you realize you've been living it all along. Chapter 8. Living fully and freely. At some point, all the numbers, strategies, and systems fade into the background, and you're left with a single question: what is all this for? That's where real wealth begins, not in accumulation, but in alignment. You've built the foundation, saved with intention, invested with purpose, tracked your progress. But freedom, at its core, isn't just the absence of financial stress. It's the presence of a life that feels meaningful, spacious, and alive. Scott Trench reminds us that the finish line isn't early retirement. It's not a dollar figure or a timeline. It's the moment you realize you no longer have to trade your best hours for survival. When your money starts working harder than you do, your attention finally becomes yours again. You can use it to create, to connect, to grow. That's the real reward of financial freedom, time with purpose. Living fully doesn't mean doing more. It means being more deliberate. It's choosing days that reflect your values, not your fears. It's waking up without the invisible pressure to prove something. When you're financially free, your priorities shift from earning to experiencing. The questions change. Instead of, how can I make more? You start asking, what's worth my time? But here's the paradox. You don't have to wait until you're financially independent to live that way. You can practice freedom before you fully have it. You can design your life around meaning right now, even if your bank account isn't where you want it to be. Because freedom isn't a destination, it's a discipline. It's the ongoing act of aligning how you live with what you truly value. Scott talks about the 4 stages of finance, from cash flow negative to neutral to positive, and finally, to free. But these aren't just financial stages, they're emotional ones. At first, you're stressed, then stable, then hopeful, and finally at peace. The shift happens not just in your income, but in your relationship with enough. You realize that happiness doesn't scale with wealth. That after a certain point, more comfort doesn't mean more fulfillment, it just means more maintenance. Freedom, then, isn't about escaping work. It's about escaping the need to do it for survival. When your assets generate income that covers your needs, you gain something priceless: the ability to choose, to work because you want to, not because you have to pursue projects that light you up, even if they don't pay much, to spend time with your family, your craft, your health, the things money can never replace. But living fully also means facing the subtle traps that appear even after you make it. The temptation to chase more, the urge to compare, the fear of stillness after years of constant striving. Many people reach financial freedom, but never feel free because they never learned how to slow down. They still measure their worth in productivity. They still live by momentum, not intention. That's why Scott ends with a reminder: wealth is a tool, not a trophy. Use it to create experiences that matter, to give generously, to learn continuously, to design a life filled with purpose, not possessions. The irony is that once you stop using money as the scorecard, you finally understand its value. It's there to serve you, not define you. Living fully is also about contribution. True abundance comes from extending your freedom to others through mentorship, generosity, or simply living as proof that a better rhythm is possible. Because when people see someone who's calm, grounded, and content in a noisy world, it wakes something up in them. That's the quiet ripple of freedom. It multiplies by example. And in that stillness, you'll notice something profound. The same frugality that once taught you discipline now gives you appreciation. The efficiency that once saved you time now grants you space. The investments that once built your wealth now fund your curiosity. Every piece of the journey circles back, not to the idea of money, but to the experience of life. This is what being set for life really means. It's not the end of ambition, it's the evolution of it. It's replacing the question, How can I afford this? With, is this worth my life energy? It's measuring success not in possessions, but in peace. And maybe that's where this whole journey leads to the simple truth that money was never the goal. Freedom was. And once you live with that clarity, you don't need to chase anything. Because you already have the one thing that can't be bought, a life that feels truly yours.